Rain did not fall over Moonfall Fortress like ordinary rain. It fell like a memory that refused to end. Heavy, cold, endless, sliding down ancient stone walls that had seen too many prisoners and too many broken promises. The sky above was a dark sheet of moving clouds, swallowing even the light from the distant moon. Thunder rolled somewhere far beyond the mountains, but it never truly reached the fortress. It always felt like sound itself got tired before arriving here. Torches along the outer walls flickered weakly. Their flames bent and twisted in the wind, as if even fire was struggling to survive in this place. Water ran through the cracks in the stone ground, forming shallow streams that carried dirt, ash, and the remains of old footsteps. Everything here felt washed but never clean. The gates opened with a deep metallic groan that echoed through the courtyard. And she entered. Elara. She did not stumble when she stepped inside, even though her wrists were bound in cold iron cuffs. The guards had tightened them more than necessary, not because she resisted, but because they did not understand people who did not resist. Her clothes were torn from long travel, damp from the rain, clinging lightly to her arms. Her hair stuck to her face in soft strands, but she never once tried to push it away. There was something unsettling in her stillness. Not weakness, not fear. Something quieter. Control. Beside her walked a small boy. He looked no older than 7 or 8. His steps were uncertain, as if the ground might suddenly vanish beneath him. His fingers clung tightly to Elara's sleeve, not letting go even when the guards tried to separate them earlier. His eyes stayed low, avoiding everything, like looking up would make the world more real than he could handle. A guard muttered behind them, his voice rough from exhaustion. She was taken from a trader convoy near the northern route. Another guard replied, watching Elara carefully. They said she fought back. Not for herself. For the others. The first guard scoffed softly. People don't do that. But even he did not sound fully convinced. Because they had all seen enough prisoners to know the difference between fear and something else. Elara was not shaking. She was not pleading. She was not looking for escape. And that alone made her dangerous in ways they did not yet understand. They led her through the inner gates, into the long stone corridor of the fortress. The air grew colder here, carrying the scent of wet stone, iron, and old smoke. Other prisoners were being processed in the same hall. Some crying, some shouting, some completely silent like their souls had already left their bodies. But Elara walked through all of it without reacting. A soldier stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Name," he demanded. His voice echoed sharply off the walls. Elara stopped. Slowly. For a moment she said nothing. Her eyes moved slightly, not to the soldier but to the boy beside her. The boy's grip tightened as if he expected her to disappear if he looked away. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Not soft, not loud, just steady. "I don't have a name you need to record." The soldier frowned immediately. "Everyone has a name." Elara looked at him then. Directly. Not in defiance. Not in submission. Just truthfully. "Then write what you want," she said. "It won't change who I am." The soldier didn't like that answer. He was used to fear, anger, resistance, anything that gave him control. But her calmness gave him nothing to hold on to. The boy spoke suddenly, barely above a whisper. "She didn't leave me." The entire corridor seemed to pause for half a breath. Even the guards nearby glanced over. The boy didn't look at anyone. His voice trembled slightly, but it was honest. "Absolute. She didn't leave me," he said again like he needed it to be real. Elara gently adjusted his sleeve where his fingers were clenched too tightly. Her touch was careful, practiced, like she had done this many times before for many children who were afraid of the world. "You're still here," she said quietly to him. "That's all that matters right now." The soldier hesitated, then waved them forward. They were taken to a temporary cell block. Stone walls, iron bars, narrow space, the kind of place where time felt slower than life outside it. The door closed behind them with a heavy sound. Not a slam, A final decision. Inside, Elara immediately guided the boy to sit against the wall. The stone was cold enough to make him flinch, but she didn't let him pull away. Instead, she removed a small piece of cloth from her sleeve and placed it under him so he wouldn't feel the full cold. "You should use this," the boy said, trying to push it back toward her. Elara shook her head slightly. "I can sit on cold stone," she said. "You shouldn't have to." That simple sentence carried something heavier than the iron chains outside. The boy looked at her for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to understand why she spoke like that. "Are they going to take me away?" he asked finally. Elara didn't answer immediately. Outside the cell, footsteps passed slowly, guards moving through the corridor. The sound of keys clinking, doors locking, the fortress settling into its night routine. She listened to all of it before speaking. "No," she said at last. "Not if I am still here." The boy didn't fully understand what she meant, but he believed her anyway. Outside the cell, something shifted in the air. Not visible, not loud, but present. At the top of the corridor, in a shadow that even torchlight avoided, a massive figure stood still. A beast shaped in silence and darkness. Black fur soaked faintly from the rain that had followed it inside. Eyes sharp, intelligent, and unreadable. The Alpha King's Hound. It was known across Moonfall Fortress as something that never disobeyed. Something that never hesitated. Something that moved only when the Alpha King commanded it. And yet now, moved, slowly, without sound. It descended the stone stairs one step at a time, ignoring passing guards who instinctively stepped aside. No one dared to question it. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. Because when the hound moved like this, it meant something no one understood yet. It reached the corridor where Elara's cell stood. And it stopped, right in front of her door. The guards nearby froze. One of them whispered, almost afraid of his own voice. "It never leaves his side." Another answered quietly. "Then why is it here?" No one had an answer. Inside the cell, Elara was speaking softly to the boy, telling him a simple story. Something about a river that kept flowing even when stones tried to stop it. Her voice was low, steady, almost soothing. The boy's eyelids were getting heavier. The hound lowered itself onto the stone floor outside the cell. Not lying down fully, just sitting, watching. Its eyes fixed on Elara through the iron bars. Elara did not notice it at first. She was focused on the boy, brushing damp hair away from his forehead as he slowly drifted into sleep. Only when the room became unusually still did she lift her gaze slightly. And for the first time, she saw it. The black hound sitting outside her cell. Their eyes met. For a moment neither moved. No sound in the corridor. No footsteps. No commands. Just silence stretching between them like something fragile but heavy. Elara did not show fear. She did not move back. She simply looked at it, as if trying to understand why it was there. Outside, one of the guards slowly reached for his weapon, but another stopped him with a quick gesture. "Don't," he whispered. "It hasn't attacked." Inside the cell, the boy shifted in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Elara gently placed her hand on his shoulder to calm him. The hound did not blink. Just watched. Time passed strangely in that moment. Minutes felt like something heavier than hours. Then Elara spoke, not loudly, not as a command, but as if speaking to something that might understand more than it showed. "You're not here for me," she said softly. The hound did not react. But it did not leave either. Elara tilted her head slightly, studying it. "Then who are you watching?" she asked. The corridor remained silent. Only the rain outside answered, tapping against the stone like distant fingers. The hound finally shifted its weight slightly, adjusting its posture. Still watching. Still unmoving in purpose. Elara slowly lay down beside the boy, using her arm as a pillow so he wouldn't feel the hardness of the floor. Her eyes remained open. Not afraid. Just aware. Like she could feel something in this fortress watching her back, even when nothing should have been there. Outside the cell, the hound lowered its head slightly. Not sleeping. not leaving, guarding. And somewhere deep inside Moonfall Fortress, far above in a tower where decisions were made in silence and shadow, the Alpha King would soon hear something unusual. Not a report, not a warning, but a whisper. That his hound had chosen to sit outside a stranger's cell and refuse to move. For 6 days. Even though no one yet knew why. The fortress felt different after that night. Not because anything visibly changed, but because something invisible had begun to settle into its walls. Moonfall Fortress was used to noise. Orders shouted in corridors, prisoners crying, guards arguing, chains dragging across stone floors. But now there was a strange kind of silence spreading through its upper halls. A silence that felt watched. 6 days passed like that. 6 days where time moved, but something inside the fortress did not. Elara remained in the same cell. The boy stayed beside her. And outside the iron bars, the Alpha King's hound never moved from its place. At first, the guards thought it was temporary. A strange behavior, maybe a moment of instinct. But by the second day, they stopped questioning it and started avoiding it. By the third day, they spoke in lower voices when passing the corridor. By the 5th day, even the bravest soldiers no longer met the hound's gaze. Because it had not blinked much. It had not slept properly. It had not left. It simply existed there like a shadow that had chosen a purpose no one understood. Inside the cell, Elara did not ask questions about it. She did not mention it. She did not react as though it was unusual. Instead, she continued caring for the boy as if the world outside the bars was not worth her attention. Every morning, when the faint light of dawn slipped through the narrow fortress windows, she would gently wake him. "Are you hungry?" she would ask. And every morning, the boy would nod silently. The food they received was never enough. Dry bread, sometimes a thin bowl of broth. But Elara always divided it equally, even when it was obvious she needed more. The boy noticed that more than anything else. One morning after the 4th day, he finally spoke more than a whisper. "Why do you give me the bigger piece sometimes?" he asked. Elara paused for a moment, holding a piece of bread in her hand. Then she smiled faintly. "Because you are still growing," she said. The boy frowned slightly. "And you are not." Elara looked at him for a long moment, as if the question carried more weight than it should have. "I already grew in a place where there was never enough," she said quietly. "Now it's your turn to not feel that." The boy didn't fully understand her words, but he understood the feeling behind them. Outside the cell, the hound shifted slightly. Had heard everything. Not in words, but in presence. The way she spoke. The way she gave without hesitation. The way she never once asked for anything in return. On the 5th day, the guards finally brought news from outside. The Alpha King had returned. The word spread through the fortress like a slow-moving storm. Soldiers straightened their posture. Doors were cleaned. Corridors were checked twice. Every corner suddenly felt more alive, more tense. Because the Alpha King did not return often. And when he did, things usually changed. Rowan arrived without ceremony. No loud procession. No celebration. Only silence followed by presence. He moved through the upper corridors with controlled steps. His cloak still damp from travel. His expression unreadable. He was not a man who wasted emotion on unnecessary things. The Alpha King had built his rule on control, discipline, and distance. But as he walked through the fortress that night, something immediately felt off. His advisors met him halfway through the corridor. "My king," one of them said carefully. "There is an unusual situation." Rowan did not stop walking. "What situation?" he asked calmly. The advisor hesitated. "The hound." That made him pause. Just slightly. That was enough. Rowan turned his head a fraction. "Speak." "It has not left the lower prisoner corridor for nearly a week," the advisor said. "It refuses commands. It does not respond to relocation attempts. It simply remains there." For a moment Rowan said nothing. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. The hound did not disobey. Ever. which meant this was not disobedience. It was something else. "Show me," Rowan said finally. His voice was calm, but there was a subtle weight in it now. The kind that made even experienced soldiers step aside faster. They led him down the stone corridors. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until finally they reached the cell block. And Rowan saw it. The massive black hound sitting in front of an iron cell. Perfectly still, like it had become part of the architecture itself. But what caught his attention more than the animal was what lay beyond it. Inside the cell, woman, sitting beside a sleeping child, not begging, not crying, not reacting to anything around her, just present. Rowan stopped walking. For the first time, something in his expression shifted slightly. Not surprise. Recognition of something unusual. The hound did not move when he arrived. It did not acknowledge its master immediately. Its gaze remained fixed on the woman inside the cell. Rowan stepped closer. Slowly. The guards behind him held their breath. Because no one spoke in the presence of the Alpha King unless spoken to. Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the scene. The woman inside the cell finally noticed him. Elara looked up. For a brief moment their eyes met. No fear. No shock. Just quiet awareness. She did not stand. She did not bow. She simply observed him the same way she might observe any other person entering a space she had no control over. That alone made Rowan's gaze linger longer than expected. Most prisoners broke under his presence. But she did not. The boy stirred slightly in his sleep but did not wake. The hound finally shifted, just slightly, as if acknowledging Rowan's arrival without breaking its focus on Elara. Rowan spoke first. "Why is my hound here?" he asked. His voice was calm, but carried authority that filled the corridor. Elara looked at the animal for a moment before answering. "I don't know your hound," she said simply. "It came here on its own." A faint silence followed. One of the guards stepped forward quickly. "My king, it arrived on the first night and has not moved since." Rowan raised a hand slightly. The guard stopped speaking immediately. Rowan's eyes returned to Elara. "And you?" he asked. "You are not afraid of it?" Elara tilted her head slightly. "It hasn't done anything to make me afraid," she replied. That answer was not what anyone expected. Not fear. Not worship. Not ignorance. Just observation. Rowan studied her more carefully now. Something about her presence felt wrong in the way things were usually right in his world. Not dangerous. Not safe. Just different. The hound finally exhaled softly, a deep controlled breath, and lowered its head slightly again, still refusing to leave. Rowan noticed that. His eyes narrowed slightly. The silence stretched. Then, unexpectedly, the boy inside the cell shifted and woke up. He looked around confused at first, then saw Elara and immediately relaxed. Then he saw Rowan. He froze. Elara gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she said softly. The boy didn't speak. But he didn't move away either. Rowan's gaze lingered on the child for a moment longer than necessary. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "You have been here for 6 days," he said. Elara nodded slightly. "I was brought here. I didn't choose it." "And yet you remain calm," Rowan said. Elara looked at him steadily. "Fear doesn't change where you are," she said. "It only changes how you survive it." That sentence lingered in the air longer than expected. Even Rowan did not respond immediately. Outside the cell, the hound shifted again, barely noticeable but intentional, as if something in her words aligned with something it already understood. Rowan finally turned slightly to one of his advisors. "Has she been questioned?" he asked. "Yes, my king," the advisor replied quickly. "She refused to give identification. She only requested protection for the child." Rowan looked back at Elara. "You protect others before yourself," he said. It wasn't a question. Elara didn't deny it. "Yes," she said simply. Another pause. The fortress felt smaller in that moment. Not physically. Emotionally. As if something unseen had entered the space and was changing its shape. Rowan finally turned slightly toward the Hound. "Come," he commanded. The word was firm. Clear. Absolute. The Hound did not move. A silence followed that felt heavier than anything before it. The guards stiffened immediately. No one had ever witnessed this. Rowan's expression did not change, but something sharper entered his eyes. He repeated slightly lower. "Come." Will. No movement. The Hound remained seated, watching Elara. Not defiant. Not aggressive. Just anchored. To her. Rowan slowly turned his gaze back toward the cell. Now his attention was no longer divided. It was fully focused. To her. And for the first time since he arrived, something like curiosity replaced control in his expression. Because nothing in his world ignored him. Except this. Inside the cell, Elara gently adjusted the boy's blanket again as he drifted back toward sleep. Then she looked up once more, meeting Rowan's gaze calmly. And in that silence between the Alpha King, the unmoving Hound, and the woman who refused to show fear, something unseen began to shift. Something none of them could name yet. But something that had already started choosing sides. The council chamber of Moonfall Fortress was never truly silent, even when no one spoke. Carried the weight of old decisions. Stone pillars rose high into the dark ceiling, carved with symbols of ancient pack laws and forgotten wars. Torches burned along the walls, their flames steady but dim, as if even fire behaved carefully in this room. The air smelled of aged wood, cold metal, and authority that had been repeated for generations until it no longer needed explanation. Elara stood at the center, not chained this time, but still clearly not free. Behind her, guards remained at a respectful distance. Not because she was powerful, but because something about her presence had already begun to make people uncertain of how close they should stand. At her feet, the small boy stayed close, holding the edge of her sleeve. He did not look at the council. He did not look at the nobles. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground as if the world above him was too heavy to face. And just behind Elara's left side, the Alpha King's Hound. It had followed her into the chamber without resistance. Not behind Rowan. Not beside guards. But beside her. The council noticed immediately. Whispers moved like wind through the upper rows of seated elders. That Hound. It does not leave its assigned position. Why is it standing there? No one answered. 'Cause no one understood. Then came Rowan. The Alpha King entered the chamber without announcement. No ceremonial fanfare. No loud declaration. Only silence changed shape when he walked in. The entire room shifted instinctively, even before anyone bowed. He did not sit on the throne immediately. Instead he stood at the upper level watching. Observing. Elara did not look at him right away. She remained still, her expression calm, almost unreadable. That alone unsettled several council members. Most prisoners broke under even the thought of standing here. But she did not. Finally, the elder council speaker raised his voice. "State your identity," he demanded, echoing through the chamber. Elara looked up slowly. Not at the speaker first. The room. At the people watching her like she was a problem waiting to be solved. Then she answered. "I am Elara." Pause followed. The speaker narrowed his eyes. "Elara of what territory?" She shook her head slightly. "No territory." Murmurs immediately rose again. "That is not possible," one noble said sharply. "Everyone belongs to a pack," another added. Elara's voice remained steady. "I didn't say I don't belong," she said. "I said I don't have one you need to record." That response created a ripple of tension through the chamber. Rowan finally stepped forward slightly, just enough for his presence to become more central. "Continue," he said calmly. The speaker gestured toward her. "You were found traveling with slave traders' convoy remnants," he said. "Explain your involvement." For the first time, Elara's expression changed slightly. Not fear, but memory. The boy at her side tightened his grip on her sleeve. Elara spoke slowly. "I was inside that convoy," she said. "Not as one of them. As someone taken by them." The chamber shifted again. "Then how did you survive?" another council member asked immediately. Elara looked at him. "By not becoming what they expected me to be," she replied. Silence followed. Heavy one. Even the torches seemed quieter. The speaker leaned forward. "And the child?" he asked. Elara placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "He was there too," she said simply. "I chose not to leave him behind." A noble scoffed. "Sentimentality is not a defense in law." Elara turned her eyes toward him. "I didn't ask it to be," she said. "I am not defending myself." That statement surprised even Rowan slightly. The speaker frowned. "Then what are you doing here?" Elara's gaze softened just a little when she looked down at the boy again. "Making sure he is not forgotten," she said. That sentence landed differently. Heavier than law. Heavier than politics. For a moment, even the council did not interrupt. Then the speaker regained control. "You risked your life for strangers during captivity," he said. "Why?" Lara paused. The chamber waited. Even Rowan watched more closely now. Then she answered. "Because they were alive," she said simply. "And I was there." The answer was too simple for most of them to accept, but too honest to easily dismiss. A younger noble leaned forward. "So you admit you interfered with trade operations between territories?" Elara looked at him. "I admit I stopped people from being treated like objects," she said. A low murmur of disagreement spread through the council. The speaker raised his hand for silence. But before he could continue, something shifted behind Elara. The Hound moved slightly. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just enough to be noticed. Every eye in the chamber turned toward it. Even Rowan's. The speaker swallowed slightly but continued. "That creature has remained beside you since your arrival," he said. "Why?" Elara glanced at the Hound. Then back at the council. "I didn't ask it to," she said. "That is not an answer," the speaker snapped. Elara's voice stayed calm. "It is the only one I have." A silence followed. Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly, not at her, but at the situation. Because the Hound still had not left her side. That was not normal. That was not instinct alone anymore. That was attachment. The speaker tried again. "You are accused of hiding identity and interfering with pack operations. What do you have to say in your defense?" Elara looked around the chamber slowly. At all of them. Then she said something that shifted the entire atmosphere. "I don't defend myself," she said. "Because I don't believe I have done anything that needs defending." Gasps were quiet but present. A noble stood. "That is arrogance." Elara met his gaze. "No," she said. "It is clarity." The boy looked up at her slightly, as if sensing the weight of her words but not understanding them fully. Rowan finally spoke again. "Continue," he said, voice controlled. The speaker hesitated, then moved forward. "Reports from border packs state that survivors from the convoy dispute your actions," he said. "They claim your interference caused instability." Elara shook her head slightly. "I didn't create instability," she said. "I revealed it." That caused another wave of murmurs. The council was dividing. Some elders looked thoughtful. Others looked angry. One older council member leaned forward. "Even if your intentions were pure," he said slowly, "actions like yours create political consequences." Elara looked at him quietly. "Then maybe the consequences should be examined," she replied. That statement was dangerous. Not because it was loud, but because it was reasonable. Rowan watched her carefully now. Not as a prisoner. Not as a suspect. But as something harder to define. The speaker attempted to regain control again. "This council will decide your fate," he said firmly. "Until then." He stopped. Because the Hound suddenly stood. Not attacking. Not growling. Just standing. Its eyes fixed on the council, then briefly on Elara, as if confirming something unseen. Attention spread instantly through the chamber. Guards shifted their grip on weapons. Rowan raised one hand slightly. They stopped. Silence returned again, thicker this time. Elara placed a hand lightly on the boy's back, grounding him. She didn't look at the Hound, but she felt it. Rowan finally spoke, quieter now. "Why does it remain?" he asked. No one answered immediately. Then Elara said something softly, almost like she was thinking aloud. "Maybe it doesn't see me the way you do," she said. That sentence stayed in the air. Rowan's gaze sharpened slightly. The speaker looked between them. "This concludes the hearing for now," he declared quickly, sensing instability. "She will remain under observation." But even as he said it, no one was looking at him anymore. They were looking at the Hound, Elara, Rowan, and at the strange silence forming between them. As guards began to guide Elara back toward the exit, the boy clung tighter to her sleeve. She bent slightly and whispered to him. "You did well," she said. The boy nodded faintly, still overwhelmed. The Hound followed them immediately. Rowan did not stop it this time. Instead he watched. Long after they left the chamber, the council remained unsettled, because nothing about what they had just seen fit into law, or logic, or anything they understood. And somewhere deep inside Rowan's thoughts, a question had begun forming. Not about the prisoner, not about the council, but about the Hound that had ignored everything it had ever obeyed. For a woman who had refused to be afraid. The royal library of Moonfall Fortress was nothing like the rest of the kingdom. It did not feel like a place built for power. It felt like a place built for silence that had learned how to breathe. Tall stone shelves stretched upward in endless rows, filled with old books, cracked journals, and scrolls sealed in faded leather. Dust floated through the air like soft golden ash whenever light slipped through the narrow high windows. The entire room carried a strange calm, as if even time moved more carefully here. Elara stood at the entrance for a moment, unsure if she was meant to step inside. Behind her, guards waited quietly, not because she was dangerous, but because the order they had been given was unclear even to them. Inside the library, Rowan was already there. Not seated on a throne, not surrounded by advisors, just standing near a long wooden table, studying a map spread across its surface. A single lantern burned beside him, casting soft light over inked lines and old markings of territories long changed. He did not look up immediately when Elara entered, but he knew she had arrived. The Hound was already inside, lying near one of the pillars, as if it had claimed that space without permission or question. Its eyes were half open but alert, always alert. Yet its body was calm in a way no one had seen before. Elara noticed it first. Then she noticed the silence around her. And finally she noticed Rowan. He finally spoke without turning. "You will remain under observation here for now," he said calmly. The council agreed to limited movement under supervision. Elara nodded slightly. "I understand." Her voice did not carry resentment, only acceptance. That made Rowan glance at her briefly for the first time. Most prisoners argued. She did not. A small boy walked beside Elara into the library. He looked even smaller in this space, surrounded by knowledge he could not yet understand. He stayed close to her side, watching everything with quiet curiosity mixed with hesitation. Elara gently guided him forward. "You can sit here," she said softly, placing him near a low reading bench. The boy hesitated. "I don't know how to read." Elara knelt slightly beside him. "Then we start with something simple," she said. Before she could continue, Rowan's voice came from across the room. "You may use the lower section of the library," he said without looking at them. "Do not touch restricted archives." Elara nodded again. "Thank you." It was simple. Too simple for a place where permission usually came with fear. Rowan finally turned slightly, observing them. The boy glanced at him briefly, then quickly looked away. The Hound shifted position slightly, still lying near the pillar, but now watching Elara more closely. Something about the dynamic in the room did not feel normal. Not hostile. Not peaceful. Just unfamiliar. Elara moved slowly between shelves, her fingers lightly brushing over old books. She did not pull anything out yet. She was not searching like a scholar. She was listening to the silence between stories. Rowan noticed that most people came to the library to take knowledge. She moved as if she respected it. The boy followed her quietly, staying within distance but not clinging as tightly as before. The safety of the fortress had begun to settle into him slightly. Elara picked a worn book from a lower shelf and returned to the table. She opened it carefully. The pages were fragile, yellowed with age. The boy leaned closer. "What is it?" he asked. Elara smiled faintly. "Stories," she said. "From long before us." She pointed to a simple illustration. "This one is about a river that refuses to stop flowing, even when stones try to block it." The boy tilted his head. "Why doesn't it stop?" Elara paused slightly. "Because stopping would mean forgetting what it is meant to be," she said. The boy looked at the picture longer this time. Rowan, still nearby, heard that sentence. And for a moment, something in his expression changed slightly. He turned back toward the map quickly, as if ignoring it. But he had heard it. The Hound's ears twitched slightly. Elara began slowly reading aloud. Her voice was not loud, but it carried through the library softly, like it belonged there. The boy listened carefully, following each word with growing focus. Rowan watched without meaning to. He told himself it was only supervision. But he did not leave. Time moved differently inside the library. Hours passed without feeling like hours. The boy eventually began asking small questions. "What does that word mean?" Elara would explain gently. "What happens next?" She would turn the page. At some point he laughed softly. It was small, but it echoed more loudly than anything else in the room. Even the Hound lifted its head slightly at that sound. Rowan noticed it immediately. The Hound reacted to the boy's laughter. Not to threat, not to command, but to emotion. That unsettled him slightly. Elara did not notice Rowan watching most of the time. She was focused on the boy. And something about that focus felt different from anything the fortress was used to. At one point, she stood and moved toward another shelf. This time she paused longer. Her fingers stopped on a specific book. It was older than the others. Its cover was dark, almost blackened with age. She pulled it out slowly. Dust fell from it as she placed it on the table. Rowan finally spoke. "That section is not restricted," he said. "But it is rarely read." Elara looked at the cover. "There are marks inside," she said softly. Rowan stepped closer without realizing it. "What marks?" Elara opened the book carefully. Inside were drawings, symbols, and illustrations of wolves. Not ordinary wolves. Something larger, more intentional. The boy leaned in again. "What is that?" he asked. Elara traced one symbol gently. "I think it is a story," she said. Rowan now stood closer behind her than before. He looked at the page. His expression sharpened slightly. "That symbol," he murmured. Elara glanced at him briefly. "You recognize it?" Rowan did not answer immediately. The Hound slowly stood up from its resting place. It walked closer. Not aggressively, just attentive. Rowan finally spoke. "It is an old marking," he said. "From early pack legends. Few records remain." Elara continued turning pages. More wolves. More symbols. And then something different. A wolf standing beside a human figure. Not attacking. Not hunting. Just standing. Protecting. The boy pointed at it. "That one looks like him," he said suddenly, pointing toward the Hound. The room went still for a fraction of a second. Even Rowan's gaze shifted. The Hound looked at the boy. Then at the book. Then at Elara. Elara didn't react dramatically. She simply studied the image. "It does," she said quietly. Rowan narrowed his eyes slightly. That is not possible, he said. Elara looked up at him. Why not? Rowan answered carefully. Because those records describe something symbolic. Not real. Elara closed the book slightly but did not remove her hand. Most things people call symbolic, she said, are only real when someone remembers them. That sentence lingered again. The boy yawned softly, leaning closer to Elara. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder. You should rest, she said. He nodded and curled slightly on the bench, already drifting into sleep. The library grew quieter again. Rowan looked at the sleeping child for a moment, then back at Elara. The Hound sat again, but now closer than before. Not guarding the room, guarding her space. Rowan noticed that shift clearly now. He stepped a little closer to the table. You speak as if you understand things you should not, he said. Elara looked at him calmly. I only understand what I see, she replied. And what do you see? Rowan asked. Elara looked around the library. The books, the boy, at the quiet space around them. I see people who forget that survival is not the same as living, she said softly. Rowan did not respond immediately. That answer touched something deeper than he expected. He had seen wars, borders, but not many people spoke like that inside his fortress. The Hound shifted again slightly. Rowan noticed something else now. The Hound was not just near her. It was oriented toward her. Always. Even in stillness. Elara began gently repairing a torn page she had noticed earlier, smoothing it carefully so it would not tear further. Rowan watched her hands. Steady. Careful. Not rushed. Not afraid. Something about it made the library feel less like a place of books, and more like a place of healing. After a long silence, Rowan finally spoke again. You will continue your time here, he said. Elara nodded. I understand. Then she added something softer. Thank you for letting him see this place. Rowan looked at the sleeping boy again. He did not respond immediately, but something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly, as if that request mattered more than she realized. The Hound lay down again, but its eyes remained open, watching her, not leaving, never leaving. And as the lantern light flickered across ancient pages, something quiet but undeniable began forming in the space between them. Something that had not yet been named, but was already choosing where it belonged. The festival began as something beautiful. Music floated through the streets of Moonfall Fortress, soft drums echoing between stone towers, lanterns glowing like small captured stars. For the first time in days, the fortress did not feel like a prison or a courtroom. It felt almost alive. People gathered in the lower courtyards. Children ran between stalls. Soldiers stood less rigid than usual, watching the movement of life instead of controlling it. Even the air felt lighter, as if the mountains themselves had allowed a brief moment of peace. Elara stood near one of the open archways leading into the courtyard. She was not part of the celebration. Not officially, but she was allowed to observe. The boy stood beside her, holding her hand tightly, his eyes wide as he looked at everything he had never seen before. Lights, color, movement, voices that did not carry anger. It was overwhelming for him, and quietly overwhelming for her too. Elara did not step forward immediately. She simply watched the crowd as if trying to understand whether moments like this were real or temporary. Behind them, as always, the Alpha King's Hound stood at a distance. Not hidden, not aggressive, just present, like a shadow that had chosen to stay. Rowan was not visible at first. He had duties in the upper levels of the fortress, overseeing the gathering and ensuring security. But even without seeing him, his presence still felt like it stretched through the space. Then something shifted. A moment small enough that no one noticed at first. The boy tugged slightly on Elara's hand. I want to see closer, he said quietly. Elara looked down at him. Stay where I can see you, she said gently. He nodded eagerly. and for the first time he let go of her hand. He stepped forward into the crowd, slow at first, then faster as curiosity overcame hesitation. He moved toward a lantern stall where glowing paper lights floated gently in the air. Elara watched him go. Just for a moment. Only a moment. But in a fortress like Moonfall, moments were dangerous when they belonged to children. The boy disappeared behind a group of passing people. Elara's expression changed immediately. Not panic, but alertness. She moved forward quickly. "Wait," she called softly. But the crowd noise swallowed her voice. She stepped into the courtyard fully now, scanning left and right. The boy was gone. A gap in space where he had been just seconds before. Her breath slowed, but her eyes sharpened. She did not shout. She did not freeze. She simply started moving. Faster now. Through the crowd. Looking. Listening. Calling his name softly. The festival continued around her unaware for a few seconds more. Then she said his name again, louder this time. Still no answer. Something inside her tightened, but she did not let it show on her face. Not yet. Behind her, the Hound noticed immediately. Its head lifted. Its entire body shifted from stillness to awareness in an instant. Did not run yet. It waited, sensing. Then it stood. And began moving. Not randomly. Not uncertainly. But with direction. Elara reached the edge of the courtyard, scanning toward the narrower paths between buildings. The boy was small. Easy to miss. Easy to lose in a crowd that was growing louder by the minute. Her hand clenched slightly at her side. Not fear. Focus. She moved deeper into the side streets. The music from the festival faded slightly behind her. The air became quieter again. Colder. Stone walls replaced open courtyards. "Please," she whispered under her breath. It was not a plea to the world. It was a habit. A thought shaped from long years of surviving uncertainty. Then she heard something. Faint sound. Not crying. Not shouting. Small shuffle. She turned sharply. At the end of a narrow passage between two storage buildings, she saw movement. A small figure. Boy. Her pace quickened immediately. But as she stepped forward, another sound interrupted her. A step. Not light like a child. Heavier. Controlled. Elara stopped. Her eyes shifted. Two figures emerged from the opposite side of the passage. Not guards from the fortress. Not citizens. Strangers. Their presence did not match the festival outside. No joy in their posture. No celebration in their movement. One of them looked toward the boy, who had backed slightly against the wall. The boy's face changed instantly. Fear. Elara's expression remained still. But something in her stance shifted. The air between her and the men tightened. One of them spoke first. "Looks like the child wandered too far," he said casually. Elara stepped forward once. "You don't belong here," she said quietly. The man smirked slightly. "And yet here we are." The second man glanced at Elara. "You're the prisoner from the council hearing," he said. "Interesting that you're allowed to roam." Elara did not respond to that. Her eyes stayed on the boy. "Step away from him," she said. The tone was not loud, but it carried something firm enough that even the passage felt narrower. The men exchanged a glance. Then the first one shifted slightly toward the boy. That was all it took. Elara moved. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just instantly. She stepped between them and the child, placing herself fully in front of him. Her voice lowered. "You will not take another step." The air tightened further. For a moment no one moved. From behind Elara, a low sound echoed through the passage. Not loud, but deep. A warning. The Alpha King's Hound. It had arrived. Standing at the entrance of the passage. Its presence filled the narrow space instantly. The men froze. Even their confidence seemed to hesitate. One of them muttered under his breath. "That's the Royal Hound." Elara did not turn around. She did not need to. The boy behind her whispered her name softly, trembling. "Elara." She lowered her hand slightly behind her, just enough for him to feel it. "I'm here," she said. The hound stepped forward slowly, each step measured, controlled. The sound of claws against stone echoed once. Then silence again. The first man slowly took a step back. "We didn't mean any harm," he said quickly. But his voice had changed now. Less certain, less steady. Elara finally spoke again. "You are in a fortress you don't understand," she said. "Leave before it decides you don't belong in it." That sentence was enough. The men hesitated, then turned, and left quickly. No confrontation, no fight, just retreat. The passage fell silent again. Only the faint sound of festival music in the distance remained. Elara stayed still for a moment, then slowly turned around. The boy immediately clung to her again. "I got lost," he said quickly, voice shaking. Elara knelt down immediately, placing both hands gently on his shoulders. "No," she said softly. "You did not get lost. You were found." The boy blinked. The fear in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by relief. Behind them, the hound stood quietly now, watching, but no longer tense. Elara looked at it for a brief moment, then back at the boy. "Stay close next time," she said gently. He nodded immediately. "I will." She stood slowly, her gaze softening again. But something inside her had changed slightly. Not fear, not anger, something more subtle. Awareness. 'Cause she understood now. Even moments of light could break without warning. The hound stepped closer, stopping just a short distance away from her and the boy. Not interfering, just present. Rowan appeared at the edge of the passage moments later. He had followed the movement. His gaze first landed on the boy, then on Elara, then on the hound. And he understood without anyone speaking. Something had happened. Elara met his eyes briefly. "I found him," she said simply. Rowan nodded once. His expression remained controlled. But his eyes lingered slightly longer on her than before. On the way she stood between danger and the child without hesitation. On the way the hound had arrived without command. On the way nothing about this situation followed normal rules anymore. The boy held Elara's hand again, tighter this time. And as the festival music continued faintly in the background, something unspoken settled between them again. Not peace, not danger, but something in between. Something that was still deciding what it wanted to become. The morning after the festival did not feel like peace. Felt like waiting. Moonfall Fortress had a way of turning quiet into tension. Even when nothing was happening, the stone walls seemed to hold their breath, as if expecting something to break through at any moment. Guards moved differently that day. Slower, more alert, speaking less. Word had spread that strangers were approaching the outer gates. Not traders. Not visitors. Former slave handlers. And they were not coming quietly. Elara stood near the inner courtyard, watching the gates from a distance. The boy stayed close to her side again. After last night, he no longer wandered far. His fingers naturally found her sleeve whenever he felt uncertain, as if the world made more sense when she was near. But today even he felt the difference in the air. Something heavier was approaching. The Alpha King's hound stood a few steps behind them. Focused. Not reacting to sound or movement yet, but already aware. Then the gates opened. Not forcefully, not suddenly, but slowly, deliberately. A group of armed men entered the courtyard under escort. Their clothing was worn but organized. Their expressions controlled but sharp. They did not look like prisoners. They looked like people used to control. And they were not alone. Behind them carts rolled forward. Old transport wagons. Rust-covered. Except for one thing. Dozens of iron chains lay inside, tangled together like dead weight from another life. Their sound against wood was harsh even without movement, scraping faintly as the carts stopped. The entire courtyard shifted instantly. Guards tightened their formation. Whispers spread through the air. Elara stepped forward slightly before she realized she had moved. The boy stayed close. The lead man from the group stepped forward. "I request audience with the council," he said firmly. "We have come to reclaim what belongs to us." The word belongs hung in the air like something poisonous. An elder guard responded immediately. "No captives belong to you," he said sharply. The man smiled faintly. "That depends on your interpretation of law." From the upper steps of the fortress, Rowan appeared. His presence changed the courtyard instantly. Silence deepened. Even the wind seemed to pause. He descended slowly, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on the group. "You enter my fortress without invitation," Rowan said calmly. "And speak of law." The lead man did not lower his eyes. "We are within rights granted through border agreements," he replied. "Survivors of the convoy are to be returned for judgment." A faint tension spread among the guards. Elara watched carefully. The boy pressed closer to her. Rowan stopped at the base of the steps. "Show your claim," he said. The men gestured toward the wagons. "We lost property during the attack on our convoy," the man said. "We believe survivors taken by your guards belong to us until legal resolution is complete." A low murmur spread. Not agreement. Not approval. Unease. Elara's expression changed slightly. Not anger yet, but understanding. Rowan did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked at the wagons. The chains inside. Then at Elara. Something in his gaze sharpened slightly. Because he understood what this was really about. Control disguised as law. Elara stepped forward. Not waiting for permission. The courtyard shifted immediately. The lead man looked at her. Recognition flickered briefly. "You," he said. "The one from the hearing." Elara stopped a few steps away from Rowan. She did not look at the man first. She looked at the chains. They were old, worn. Not new symbols of restraint, but reminders of what had already happened. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "These chains belong to people," she said. The man tilted his head slightly. "They belong to operations," he corrected. Elara looked at him directly. "That is not the same thing." A silence followed. The boy stood behind her, watching everything carefully. The Hound moved slightly closer now. Rowan did not interrupt. He was watching her. The lead man stepped forward. "Your fortress interfered with lawful trade," he said. "We are here to resolve that disruption." Elara looked at him steadily. "You call it trade," she said. "But people were not goods." A few guards shifted uncomfortably. The man exhaled slowly. "Emotion does not change structure," he said. "The law remains the law." Elara looked down at the chains again. For a moment, something in her expression softened. Not weakness, memory. Then she walked toward the nearest wagon. The courtyard watched. No one stopped her. Even Rowan did not. She reached down slowly and picked up one chain. It was heavier than it looked. Cold. Real. She held it for a moment, then turned back toward the group. "You want what belongs to you?" she asked quietly. The man nodded slightly. Elara walked toward the center of the courtyard. And without warning, she dropped the chain into the fire pit nearby. It clanged loudly against stone. The sound echoed through the entire fortress. Every head turned. Even the boy flinched slightly. Elara stood still after it. Then she spoke. "This is what belongs to you," she said. The man frowned immediately. "You have no authority to destroy evidence." Elara looked at him. "These are not evidence," she said. "They are reminders." She stepped back slightly, then added softly, "And reminders should not be owned." A silence followed. Heavy. Even the guards did not move. Rowan watched her closely now. The Hound sat beside her without command. Not aggressive. Not reacting to anyone else. Just there. The lead man's expression hardened. "You are making a political mistake," he said. Elara nodded slightly. "Maybe," she said. "But not a moral one." That sentence landed harder than expected. A few council members on the upper steps shifted uneasily. Rowan raised a hand slightly. He had not spoken yet. But the courtyard listened anyway. Elara reached into the wagon. She picked up another chain. She looked at it for a moment, then turned slightly toward the boy. She knelt down. "Do you want to help me?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated. He looked at the chain, then at her, then nodded slowly. Elara placed the chain gently into his hands. "It is heavy," she said, "but you do not have to carry it alone." The boy struggled slightly under its weight. Elara guided his hands. Then together they walked toward the fire pit and dropped it in. Another loud clang. This time the sound felt different. Not just metal, but release. The courtyard was completely silent now. Even the lead man had stopped speaking for a moment. Elara stood again, looking at the fire. The chains inside began to heat slowly, their shape changing as flames touched them. Not destruction, transformation. She turned slightly toward the survivors standing behind the wagons. Her voice softened. "You do not have to take these back," she said. "You can leave them here." One of the survivors hesitated. Another looked away. But slowly, one by one, they stepped forward. Not forced, not commanded, just choosing. And they began dropping chains into the fire. Each sound echoed differently. Less like metal, more like endings. The boy watched quietly, then whispered, "It's loud." Elara nodded. "Yes," she said. "Freedom is not always quiet." Rowan finally stepped forward. His voice broke the silence gently. "This is not a decision made lightly," he said. Elara turned to him. "I know," she replied. Their eyes met. For a moment everything else faded. The court, men, the fire, even the Hound. Rowan studied her carefully. "You understand what this may cause," he said. Elara nodded again. "Yes. And yet you do it anyway," Rowan said. Elara looked back at the fire. "Because not doing it would be worse." A long silence followed. The lead man finally stepped back slightly. Not defeated, not agreeing, but uncertain. That was new. The Hound stood slowly. It walked toward Elara and sat beside her again. Not as a tool, not as a weapon, but as presence. Rowan noticed that. Everyone did. The courtyard felt different now. Not because the chains were burning, but because no one was sure who had control of the moment anymore. Elara looked at the fire one last time, then at the boy. He was still holding her hand, still steady now. Rowan's voice came quietly. "This concludes the hearing of claims," he said. The lead man opened his mouth slightly, but stopped, because there was nothing left to argue against in that moment. Only silence. As the fire continued to burn behind them, and the chains slowly disappeared into something they had never been allowed to become before. The night wind moved through Moonfall Fortress like it was carrying old secrets that had never been spoken aloud. The torches along the upper corridors burned low, their flames bending gently as if even light was listening. Inside the healer's chamber, everything was quieter than the rest of the fortress. This room was older than most parts of the castle. Stone walls softened by time. Shelves filled with herbs, scrolls, and forgotten remedies. The air smelled faintly of dried leaves and something warm beneath it, like comfort that had survived centuries of suffering. Rowan stood near the center of the room. Not as a king, not as a ruler, just as a man trying to understand something that no longer fit inside his world. The Alpha King's Hound sat beside him, ill, alert, but different now. Not restless, not uncertain, as if it was waiting for something it already knew was coming. Elara was not present in the chamber, but her presence still felt heavy in Rowan's thoughts. The healer, an elderly woman with slow but precise movements, stepped forward from a table covered in ancient papers. Her hands trembled slightly as she carefully placed a worn wooden box onto the stone surface. "I should not be the one to show you this," she said quietly. Rowan did not respond immediately. His eyes remained on the box. "What is it?" he asked at last. The healer hesitated. "Something the fortress forgot," she replied. She opened the box. Inside was an old collar. Faded leather. Cracked with age. But still marked with symbols carved deep into its surface. Rowan's expression changed slightly. The hound lifted its head. Not aggressively, but attentively. The healer pointed at the markings. "These are not decorative," she said. "They are ancient." Rowan stepped closer. The symbols were unfamiliar at first glance, but something about them felt structured, intentional, like language that had stopped being spoken. The healer continued softly. "Long before Alpha Kings ruled this land, there were guardians," she said. "Not warriors. Not rulers. Pause. Protectors." Rowan narrowed his eyes slightly. "That is legend," he said. The healer nodded slowly. "Most truth becomes legend when people forget how to explain it." Silence settled again. The hound stood slowly, moved closer to the box, then stopped, its gaze fixed on the collar. The healer looked at Rowan. "They say these guardians do not choose strength," she said. "They choose connection, compassion, instinct that protects life before power." Rowan's voice lowered slightly. "And what does that have to do with her?" The healer did not answer immediately. Instead, she took out a second object from the box. A faded piece of parchment. On it, a drawing. A wolf standing beside a human figure. Not attacking. Not obeying. Standing. Cool. Rowan studied it carefully. Something in his expression tightened slightly. "That symbol appeared in the library," he said. The healer nodded. "It appears wherever the bond is formed," she replied. The hound stepped once closer again. Low. Deliberate. Stopped near Rowan now. But its attention was not on him. It was on the parchment. The healer's voice softened further. "When a guardian chooses someone," she said, "it does not follow orders. It follows recognition." Rowan finally looked at her. "Recognition of what?" he asked. The healer met his gaze. "Of someone who would not abandon others," she said quietly. "Oz." The words settled heavily in the room. Rowan's mind moved immediately to Elara. The prisoner. The woman who did not plead. The woman who gave her food to a child. The woman who stood between danger and innocence without hesitation. The hound had been sitting outside her cell since the first night. Without command. Without reason anyone understood. The healer continued. "They do not appear often anymore," she said. "Because people like that are rare now." Rowan's voice was quieter. "You are saying the hound is not behaving normally." The healer shook her head. "I am saying," she replied, "it is behaving exactly as it was meant to." Silence again. The fire in the chamber flickered slightly. The hound finally turned its head toward Rowan. Not challenging. Not asking permission. Just aware. Rowan held its gaze for a moment. Then slowly looked away. Something in his control over the situation had shifted. Not broken. But no longer absolute. The healer carefully closed the box. "There is something else," she said. Rowan looked at her again. Her voice lowered further. "The bond does not form with bloodline," she said. "It forms with choice." Rowan frowned slightly. "What choice?" The healer hesitated. "Every time a guardian appears," she said, "it is because someone has already chosen to protect others before being protected themselves." Oz. "And the guardian responds to that." Rowan did not speak. His thoughts drifted again. To Elara standing in the courtyard during the chains burning. To Elara placing herself between the child and danger without hesitation. To Elara speaking without fear in the council chamber. The hound shifted slightly again. Closer to Rowan now. But still not focused on him. It was still focused on something else. Someone else. Rowan finally spoke. "So you are telling me," he said slowly, "that my hound did not choose a prisoner by accident." The healer nodded. "It chose a protector," she said. Silence. The word lingered. Protector. Rowan's expression changed slightly now. Not disbelief. Not acceptance. Something in between. The idea was not easy. Because if it was true, then everything he understood about control, hierarchy, and instinct was incomplete. He looked at the parchment again. The wolf beside the human figure. Not above. Not below. Beside. Cool. The healer stepped back slightly. There is one more thing you should understand, she said. Rowan did not look away from the parchment. What? He asked. Her voice softened even more. The guardian does not only observe, she said. It binds itself to the one it chooses. That word caused a subtle shift in the air. Bind. Rowan finally looked at her fully. What kind of binding? He asked. The healer did not answer immediately. Because she was choosing her words carefully. Then she said it. Not ownership, she said. Protection. Reflection. Loyalty that cannot be broken by command. A long silence followed. The hound sat again, but closer to Rowan than before. Yet still not acknowledging him fully. Rowan slowly turned his head toward it. For the first time he studied it not as his command, but as something separate, something with its own direction. Then quietly, almost to himself, he said, "So it is not following me." The healer answered gently. "No," she said. "It is standing where it chose to stand." That sentence stayed in the air longer than anything else. Rowan's thoughts shifted again. Elara, standing in the courtyard, unmoving under pressure, refusing to abandon a child, refusing to bow to fear. The healer spoke once more. "If the bond is complete," she said, "the guardian will not leave her side." Rowan's eyes sharpened slightly. "And what happens then?" he asked. The healer looked at him for a long moment. "Then," she said softly, "you will no longer be the only force that defines this fortress." Silence followed. Heavy. Unfinished. The hound exhaled once. Whoa. Rowan finally looked at it again. Not as a tool. Not as an extension of his authority. But as something that had already stepped slightly beyond it. And somewhere deep in the fortress below, Elara, unaware of everything being said above her, was still simply trying to keep a child safe in a world that kept testing what safety meant, not knowing yet that something far older than politics or law had already begun choosing her. The morning light over Moonfall Fortress was softer than usual, not because the sun had changed, but because everything inside the fortress felt like it had quietly shifted during the night. The council hall was full again, but this time the energy was different. There was no sharp tension of accusation, no loud demands, no arguments waiting to explode. Instead, there was something unfamiliar sitting in the air. Uncertainty mixed with acceptance. Elara stood at the center of the chamber once more. But now, she was no longer standing as a prisoner. The boy stood beside her, holding her hand as always, but now his posture was calmer, more secure. Like he had begun to believe that walls were no longer meant to take people away. And beside Elara, the Alpha King's hound, still there, still watching, but no longer just watching the room, watching her. Rowan stood at the elevated platform above the council. He had not spoken yet. That silence alone made the room feel heavier than words ever could. The council elder finally stepped forward. "The matter of the outsider has been reviewed," he said slowly. "Her actions have been reconsidered in light of recent events." Pause followed. Even the word reconsidered sounded strange in this chamber. The elder continued. "She is no longer to be held under suspicion." A few council members exchanged looks. One of them spoke quietly. "And the hound?" he asked. No one answered immediately, because that question was still unresolved. Rowan finally stepped forward. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of final authority. "The hound will remain where it chooses," he said. That sentence created a ripple of silent reactions across the chamber. 'Cause it was not a command. It was acknowledgement. Elara did not react immediately. But the boy squeezed her hand slightly tighter. The elder continued carefully. "Then she is free to leave Moonfall Fortress if she chooses." All eyes turned to Elara. The room waited. Even the guards near the pillars did not move. Freedom. A word that had been discussed in politics for centuries, but rarely looked like this in reality. Elara did not answer immediately. She looked down at the boy. He looked up at her. Not afraid, but uncertain. Then she looked toward the exit of the chamber. Beyond it, the fortress stretched into mountains and distant lands she could walk into without chains for the first time. Silence held the room tightly. Then Rowan spoke again, quieter this time. "You are not bound here," he said. It was not an order, not a restriction, just truth. Elara looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked softly, "And the boy?" Rowan did not hesitate. "He will not be taken from you," he said. That answer settled something in the air. The boy's shoulders relaxed slightly. Elara looked back at the council. Then slowly she spoke. "I will not leave," she said. Quiet shift moved through the chamber. Some expected hesitation. Some expected departure. But not that. The elder frowned slightly. "You understand you are not required to stay," he said. Elara nodded. "I understand." Then she added something softer. "But I also understand what is here now." Rowan's gaze sharpened slightly. "What do you mean?" he asked. Elara looked down at the boy again. "Children who need safety," she said. "People who still don't know how to live without fear." She lifted her eyes again. "And a place that is still learning what justice looks like." Silence followed. The council did not interrupt. Because nothing she said sounded like defiance anymore. Sounded like choice. Rowan stepped down from the platform slowly. Every step echoed through the chamber. He stopped a few steps away from her. The Hound immediately moved closer to Elara at the same time. Not aggressive, just natural. Like it had already decided where it belonged. Rowan noticed it. But this time he did not question it. He simply observed it. Then he spoke. "You stayed," he said. Elara nodded slightly. "Yes." Rowan studied her for a moment longer. Then he asked something unexpected. "Why?" The chamber tightened again. Even the council leaned in slightly. Elara did not look away. "Because I was not only given freedom," she said. "I was given trust." And that is harder to leave than chains. Silence again. The boy looked up at her. Listening but not fully understanding. Rowan's expression changed slightly. Not surprise. Something quieter. Recognition. The elder cleared his throat. "Then it is decided," he said. "She remains by choice. Not by law." A finality settled into the chamber. But it did not feel like ending. Felt like beginning. The council slowly began to disperse. Not arguing. Not resisting. Just accepting. As the chamber emptied, Elara remained where she was. The boy stayed beside her. The Hound sat again, but closer than before. Rowan remained as well. He did not leave immediately. Not because he had to, but because something about the moment did not feel finished. When the chamber was nearly empty, he spoke quietly. "You could have left," he said. Elara nodded. "I know. And yet you didn't," he added. Elara looked at him. "I think some places," she said softly, "are not about staying or leaving. They are about becoming something different inside them." Rowan did not respond immediately. The words stayed with him. The boy yawned slightly and leaned into Elara. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. Rowan looked at the boy for a moment. Then at her. Then at the Hound. And something in his expression softened in a way the fortress rarely saw. Not weakness. Not vulnerability. But understanding. Finally he spoke again. "Then Moonfall Fortress changes as well," he said. Elara met his gaze. "Maybe it already has," she replied. A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just complete. The Hound stood once more. It walked a few steps forward. Then stopped beside Elara again. But this time it did something it had not done before. It lowered its head slightly. Not in command. Not in submission. but in alignment. Rowan saw it clearly. And for the first time he did not see a loss of control. He saw transformation. The boy whispered softly, "Elara." She looked down at him. "Yes." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I think I like it here now." Elara's expression softened completely. "Then we stay," she said. Outside the chamber, sunlight slowly moved across the fortress walls. Not like before, but differently. As if something inside the fortress had finally stopped resisting change and started allowing it instead. And as Rowan watched Elara standing there, no longer a prisoner, no longer a stranger, but something the fortress itself had begun to accept, he understood something quietly. This was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new one.